My envious sister wept when she learned I was promoted, then told all I used my body to climb, aiming to destroy my standing. So, I cut off her tuition. Have you ever had a moment where your entire world, the one you painstakingly built brick by brick, came crashing down because of a lie, told by your own sister? I'm talking about a betrayal so deep, so calculated, it changed the very fabric of your family, pushing you to a brink you never thought you'd see. What if I told you the lies were so vicious, they almost cost me everything, my career, my reputation, even my sanity? For 12 years, I poured my life into that company. I started in the mailroom, worked my way up, earning my MBA at night, never missing a single day. While I was doing all that, my younger sister, Haley, was still figuring out what major she wanted. But Haley always just expected to surpass me. She was the smart one, the pretty one, the one our parents always bragged about. When I told her I'd made regional director at 34, I was expecting some kind of excitement, maybe even a little pride. Can you believe it? I'd said. Her response? A flat, almost dismissive, yeah, crazy. Listen, I have to go. That should have been my first red flag. A giant, flashing, neon sign. By Sunday, my phone was absolutely exploding. My cousin Deb texted, "Is it true?" My uncle Robert called me, disgusting. My own mother, my mother, left a voicemail saying she was too ashamed to even talk to me. I was in a haze of confusion, fear, and growing anger. Finally, my Aunt Linda called, and she actually told me what the hell was going on. Haley, at Grandma's birthday party, had told everyone I was sleeping with my boss. She claimed she'd seen inappropriate texts. She'd said, and I quote, "The whole office knows, but nobody can prove it." My boss is 63, happily married for 35 years. I'd met his wife, Aaliyah, dozens of times. They were lovely people. But Haley knew exactly what she was doing. She knew our family loved drama more than truth. It didn't matter how absurd the lie was, they'd eat it up. My blood ran cold. I drove straight to my parents' house. The whole extended family was still there, like some morbid, grotesque reunion. Leftover cake sat on the table, a stark contrast to the poisonous atmosphere. The moment I walked in, every conversation stopped. You could have heard a pin drop. "There she is," my cousin Tony sneered, calling me the career woman, like it was the dirtiest insult he could think of. Haley was on the couch, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Performance tears. She'd been doing that since we were kids, a master manipulator. "How could you?" My mother's voice was laced with disgust. "We raised you better than this." Better than what? Working hard? Getting promoted? What was she even talking about? Haley saw the texts, my father interjected, his voice heavy with disappointment. "What texts?" I spat, looking directly at Haley. My voice was dangerously calm. "Show them these texts, Haley. Show everyone." She clutched her phone tighter, refusing to meet my gaze. "I deleted them," she choked out, her voice quivering. "They were too disgusting. I couldn't look at them anymore." Of course she did. Aunt Nancy shook her head, as if I were the lowest form of life. "Using your body for success. What would your grandmother think?" My grandmother, who died 10 years ago, who'd worked as a secretary her whole life, dealing with worse than anything I'd ever faced. I actually laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "This is insane." I practically yelled. "I got promoted because I brought in $8 million in new contracts last quarter. Because I restructured the entire Midwest division." Haley let out a genuinely bitter laugh. "Right. The Midwest division. Is that what you're calling him now? You're just jealous." I shot back, my voice rising. "Jealous." She stood up, her performance ramping up. "Of what?" "Being the office of having everyone know how you really got ahead." The air crackled. "You're 28 and still in school." I retorted, my words like daggers. "Still living at home. Still having mom do your laundry." She recoiled, but quickly recovered. "At least I have integrity," she snapped back. "At least when I succeed, it'll be real." The room murmured agreement. My family, they took her side without a single piece of evidence. Without asking for my story. Without even wondering why Haley would have access to my supposed inappropriate texts in the first place. I looked at each of their faces. These people who claim to love me, so quick to believe the absolute worst. You know what? I said, my voice thick with emotion. Believe whatever you want. I turned to leave, running away, just like Haley always accused me of doing when things got hard. Just like you always do when things get hard, she called after me, her voice dripping with venom. I stopped at the door, turned back slowly, and looked right at her, a cold, calculating resolve settling in. Hey, Haley, I said, my voice quiet but cutting. You should probably check your student account. There might be an issue with next semester's payment. Her face flickered, confusion warring with her fake indignation. What? What are you talking about? I left without answering. She'd figure it out soon enough. 3 days later, my phone was blowing up again. 15 missed calls from Haley. I didn't answer a single one. Finally, she showed up at my office. Security called, saying my sister was in the lobby crying. I had them send her up. She burst through my door, face red and blotchy, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Real tears this time. Not the performance art from Grandma's party. You canceled my tuition payment, she sobbed. Yes, I said, my voice flat. I stopped the transfer. But that's $30,000. It's due tomorrow. I'm aware. But you promised. You said you'd help me finish school. That was before you told everyone I'm sleeping with my boss. She paced frantically. But I was worried about you. The way you talked about him seemed inappropriate. I stared at her. I've mentioned my boss exactly twice. Once when he approved my raise, and once when his wife sent me cookies. I actually laughed a little. She sent homemade cookies, Haley. Okay, I'm sorry, she cried, desperation creeping into her voice. I was upset. I was wrong. Can you please just pay the tuition? No, I'll be kicked out. I only have 1 year left. Then you better figure something out. She looked frantic. I can't get loans. Not this fast. And Mom and Dad don't have anything saved. Sounds like a you problem, I said, my voice ice cold. She stared at me, disbelief etched on her tear-streaked face. You're really going to ruin my life over this? Ruin your life? I echoed, my voice rising slightly. Like you tried to ruin my reputation? That's different. I was emotional. I'm being practical. I don't fund people who destroy my character. This is financial abuse, she shrieked. I leaned back in my chair. No, financial abuse would be if I had some obligation to pay for your education. I don't. I was being generous. You killed that generosity. I'll tell everyone you've been paying, she threatened, her voice hoarse. Go ahead, I challenged, a smirk playing on my lips. Tell them I've been funding your education for 3 years. Every semester, every book, every lab fee, while you sat at home telling people I'm a whore. She was openly sobbing now, an ugly, guttural sound, snot running down her face. Please. I'm begging you. I'll tell everyone I lied. I shook my head, standing up from my desk. She kept sobbing, a pathetic heap, but I walked past her to my office door and opened it. Security was still waiting in the hallway, probably because they knew this might happen. I motioned them in, and they stepped inside, professional and silent. Haley looked up with bloodshot eyes, mascara streaking her cheeks. She realized what was happening and started shaking her head frantically. No, please, just give me 5 more minutes, she pleaded. But I simply looked at the security guard and nodded. He was polite but firm as he asked Haley to come with him. She stood up slowly, still crying, looking at me like I was the worst person in the world. You're really doing this, she whispered, her voice broken. I didn't answer. She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. I'll fix this. I'll tell everyone the truth. You should have done that 3 days ago, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. The security guard escorted her to the elevator, and I watched through my office window as she walked across the lobby, still wiping her face. She probably thought the tears would work, like they always did with Mom and Dad. But I wasn't them. I closed my door and sat back down at my desk. The quarterly reports were still spread across my workspace, where I'd left them before Haley burst in. I pulled them closer, trying to focus on the numbers. Revenue was up 18% in the Midwest region. My restructuring plan was working exactly how I'd projected. But my phone started buzzing before I could finish the first page. Text after text. I picked it up and saw messages from my cousin Tony, my Aunt Nancy, two more cousins I barely talked to. All of them saying basically the same thing: cruel. Heartless. How could I do this to family? My mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail again. By the third call, I turned my phone face down, but I could still hear it buzzing against the desk. I tried to focus on the reports, but the buzzing kept going. Finally, I picked up the phone and saw 5 voicemails from my mother. I played the first one. Her voice was high and tight, like she'd been crying. She said I was destroying Haley's future over hurt feelings, that I was being cruel and vindictive, that she didn't raise me to be this kind of person. The second voicemail was louder. She said Haley came home devastated and couldn't stop crying, that I was punishing her too harshly for one mistake. The other 3 voicemails said basically the same things in different ways. Then my father texted, "This is petty and you know it. She's your sister. Family is supposed to forgive." I put my phone in my desk drawer and closed it. The muffled buzzing continued, but at least I couldn't see the messages piling up. I got through 2 more pages of the quarterly report before I gave up and decided to leave early. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a glass of red wine, staring at my phone. 43 unread text messages. 12 missed calls. I took a long drink and opened my contacts. I started blocking numbers one by one. My mother. My father. Aunt Nancy. Cousin Tony. My Uncle Robert. Each one got blocked without me reading whatever angry message they'd sent. The only person I didn't block was Aunt Linda. She was the one who told me what Haley was saying in the first place. She at least cared about the truth. I finished blocking the numbers and felt my shoulders relax for the first time all day. My phone was finally quiet. I poured another glass of wine and turned on the TV to something mindless. I needed to stop thinking about all of this for a few hours. I needed peace to figure out what to do next. The next morning, I got to work early and dove into emails. I had 3 meetings scheduled and a vendor contract to review. My colleague from the sales team stopped by my office around 10 o'clock. She leaned against the door frame with her coffee mug and asked if everything was okay. "Yeah, why?" I said, feigning nonchalance. She looked uncomfortable. "I just heard some weird rumors and wanted to check in." My stomach dropped. "What kind of rumors?" She shifted her weight. "Just some stuff about you and Ralph." "I don't believe it, obviously. You two are totally professional, but I thought you should know people are talking." I felt my face get hot, a flush of anger. "Who's talking?" She shrugged. "I heard it from someone in accounting who heard it from someone else. You know how office gossip works." After she left, I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen, not seeing anything. Haley's lies had reached my professional network somehow. The people I worked with every day, the people who knew my actual work and character. This was an attack on my career, not just my personal life. I grabbed my phone and called HR. Bonnie answered on the second ring, and I asked if she had time to meet. She said to come down right away. Bonnie's office was on the 3rd floor in the HR wing. She closed the door behind me and gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat down and tried to organize my thoughts. She pulled out a notepad and pen. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm and professional. I explained everything. My promotion. My sister's jealousy. The vicious lies she told at the family party about me sleeping with Ralph. How I'd been funding her college for 3 years and cut her off when she tried to destroy my reputation. Bonnie took notes, asking sharp, precise questions about the timeline. When did the promotion happen? When did Haley spread the rumors? When did I cancel the tuition payment? I answered everything as clearly as I could. She asked if anyone else witnessed Haley making these accusations. I told her about the family party and gave her Aunt Linda's contact information. Bonnie nodded and kept writing. When I finished talking, Bonnie put down her pen and looked at me directly. "We take allegations like this very seriously," she said. "Both to protect your reputation and the company's interests. I'm going to need to investigate this thoroughly." She asked for Ralph's contact information to verify the facts. I gave her his direct line and his wife Aaliyah's number too. Then I remembered the cookies. Aaliyah sent me homemade cookies last month, I said. I still have the card she included. And the email where Ralph thanked me for the thank you note I sent her. Bonnie nodded. Send me copies of everything. Emails, texts, any documentation that shows your professional relationship with Ralph. I pulled out my phone right there and forwarded her the emails. The card from Aaliyah was in my desk drawer upstairs. I told Bonnie I'd scan it and send it over within the hour. My phone rang during lunch. Ralph's name on the screen. I answered, and he asked me to come to his office. He sounded confused, maybe a little worried. I took the elevator to the executive floor and walked to his corner office. He was standing by the window when I came in. HR just called me, he said, turning. Something about inappropriate relationship allegations. I closed the door and sat down. Then I explained the whole situation with Haley. The promotion, her jealousy, the lies she spread to my family, and how those lies somehow reached people at work. Ralph's face went from confused to shocked to angry. That's insane, he exclaimed. We barely interact outside of work meetings, and my wife knows you. She likes you. I know, I said. That's why I gave Bonnie her contact info and the emails about the cookies. Ralph shook his head, looking genuinely distressed. I can't believe anyone would think this is true. You've worked here 12 years. Everyone knows your reputation. Ralph sat down at his desk and pulled out a notepad. I'm making a formal statement to HR today, he said. And you should document everything in case your sister tries to escalate this further. He looked genuinely concerned. Aaliyah is going to be upset when she hears about this. She was just telling me last week how impressed she was with your career. She wants you to come to dinner next month. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. Thank you, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. I'm sorry you got dragged into my family drama. Not your fault, Ralph said, his voice firm. Your sister made a choice to lie. Now she gets to deal with the consequences. I spent my lunch break in my office with the door closed, writing everything down. Every interaction with Haley over the past 3 years. The first tuition payment in her sophomore year, the textbook costs I covered, the lab fees, the summer session I paid for when she wanted to take extra classes. I wrote down the dates as best as I could remember. September 2 years ago, January last year, May, August, on and on. Then I wrote about her behavior. How she complained about school being hard while I was working 60-hour weeks. How she never said thank you. How she expected me to keep paying without question. The pattern became obvious on paper. She always expected me to fund her life while resenting my success. She wanted my money but hated that I was doing better than her. The entitled attitude, the jealousy, the constant comparison. I printed out the document and put it in a folder with the cookie card from Aaliyah and the email chains with Ralph. Everything organized and ready. That evening, Aunt Linda called. I was making dinner when my phone rang. Some of the family is starting to question Haley's story, she said. I put her on speaker and kept chopping vegetables, a sliver of hope blooming in my chest. Why? Because her details keep changing, Linda explained. First, she said she saw inappropriate texts on your phone. Then, at dinner tonight, she said she heard you on a phone call with him. Then, she told your mom that a coworker told her about the affair. I stopped chopping, the knife hovering over the cutting board. So, she's told 3 different versions. At least 3 that I've heard, Aunt Linda said. Your cousin Deb called me asking which story was true. I told her none of them were true. That Haley made it up because she was jealous. I felt something loosen in my chest. Finally, someone was seeing through Haley's lies. I thanked her and hung up, feeling like maybe the truth would win out after all. 2 hours later, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing there with her arms crossed. I took a breath and opened the door. She walked in without waiting for an invitation and turned to face me in the entryway. I stayed on my feet and didn't offer her a seat. She started talking about family and how we needed to work through this together. She said forgiveness was important and that holding grudges would only hurt me in the long run. I let her talk for about 30 seconds before I cut her off. Why did you believe Haley without even calling me first? I demanded, my voice sharp, raw with old wounds. Why did you leave that voicemail saying you were too ashamed to talk to me? Why did nobody in the family think to ask for my side of the story?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at the floor, uncomfortable. Haley seemed so upset and convincing, she mumbled. "I told her I worked 12 years to get where I am. 12 years of starting in the mailroom and taking night classes for my MBA while everyone else was sleeping." I reminded her about the vendor contracts I brought in and the division restructuring that actually got me promoted. I said I funded Haley's education for 3 years without asking for anything back. Every semester payment, every textbook, every lab fee. All of it came from my salary while Haley sat at home complaining about how hard her classes were. My mother shifted her weight and looked even more uncomfortable, but she still said I was being too harsh. She said canceling the tuition was extreme and that Haley made a mistake, but didn't deserve to lose her education over it. I asked if she and Dad had any money saved to help Haley finish school. She got quiet and then admitted they didn't have anything put away. She said they were counting on me to keep paying, like I always had. The entitlement in those words hit me hard. They just assumed I would keep funding everything. They never asked if I wanted to or if I could afford it. They just expected it and got mad when I stopped. I told her that assumption was exactly why I made the right choice. She started to argue, but I was done with the conversation. I walked to the door and opened it. She stood there for a minute, looking like she wanted to say more, but nothing came out. She finally left, and I closed the door behind her. I felt completely drained, like I had just run a marathon. I ordered Chinese food from the place down the street and turned on some random cooking show. I needed my brain to stop thinking about family drama for a few hours. The next morning, I got to work early and checked my email before the rest of the team arrived. Bonnie from HR had sent a message with the subject line, "Investigation complete." I opened it and read through the whole thing twice. HR found zero evidence of any inappropriate relationship between me and Ralph. They included statements from Ralph explaining our completely professional working relationship. They had a statement from Aaliyah talking about the cookies she sent me and how she considered me a family friend. 3 other executives wrote statements confirming my professional conduct and saying the accusations were ridiculous given my reputation. Bonnie wrote that the investigation was closed and my file would reflect that the allegations were investigated and found to be completely without merit. I forwarded the email to Aunt Linda with a short message asking her to share it with anyone interested in facts instead of gossip. She texted back within 5 minutes, saying she would make sure everyone saw it. She said she would especially make sure the people who were quickest to judge would get a copy. I felt something loosen in my chest, a profound relief knowing the truth was officially documented. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but thought it might be work-related, so I picked up. Haley's voice came through the speaker, sounding calmer than before. She said she wanted to talk about finding a solution that worked for both of us. She offered to make a public apology to the whole family if I would pay for just this one semester. She said she would tell everyone she lied and made it all up. I asked her why I would spend $30,000 on someone who tried to destroy my career. She started crying again, but these tears sounded different from the dramatic ones in my office. She said she didn't think it would go this far. She said she just made a comment at the party and didn't know everyone would believe it so completely. I pointed out that she told these lies at a family party, knowing exactly how our family spreads information. She knew what would happen when she said those things about me. She got quiet on the other end of the line. Then she said something that actually sounded honest for the first time. She admitted she was jealous when I got promoted. She said she was angry that I was doing so well while she was still in school. She said it wasn't fair that I got everything when she was supposed to be the smart one. The honesty felt refreshing, even though it didn't change anything. I told her I appreciated her finally telling the truth, but it didn't erase what she did. The consequences of her choices were hers to deal with now. She asked what she was supposed to do about school. I said she could do what millions of other people do and get student loans. She said it wasn't that easy and started listing reasons why she couldn't. I stopped listening after a few seconds and told her I had to get back to work. I hung up and sat at my desk feeling oddly calm. The truth was out there now in an official HR report. Haley finally admitted she lied out of jealousy. My mother saw that her assumptions about my money weren't my responsibility. Everything was moving forward exactly how it needed to. My phone rang 30 seconds after I hung up on Haley. Dad's name flashed across the screen, and I already knew what was coming. I answered, and he started talking before I could say hello, his voice tight with stress about how Haley came home sobbing and they needed to figure this out as a family. I told him the solution was simple and millions of people managed it every year: student loans. He made a choking sound and said it wasn't that easy, that Haley couldn't get approved for that much money this fast. I pointed out that wasn't my problem anymore, and he went quiet for a few seconds. Then he tried a different approach, suggesting maybe I could do smaller payments monthly instead of one big semester amount, like a payment plan that would be easier on my budget. I shut that down before he could finish the sentence. There was no payment plan. There was no monthly arrangement. I wasn't giving Haley another dollar after what she did to my reputation. He tried to argue that I was being unreasonable, and I cut him off to explain something very clearly. I didn't trust Haley anymore. I wasn't financially responsible for a grown woman who tried to destroy my career. The silence on his end lasted longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had gone hard and angry. He said I was being cold-hearted and unforgiving. That family was supposed to help each other through difficult times. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I reminded him that family was also supposed to believe each other. Family wasn't supposed to spread vicious lies about sleeping with bosses. Family should have asked for my side before condemning me at a birthday party. He went completely quiet. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything. After maybe 10 seconds, I told him I had to get back to work and ended the call. My hands were shaking slightly when I set the phone down. Work became my refuge. Over the next week, I threw myself into a major project, restructuring our vendor contracts that had been sitting on my desk, waiting for attention. The complexity felt good. Numbers and terms and negotiations that had clear rules and logical outcomes. My team noticed I was more focused than usual. One of my project managers commented that I was working through lunch 3 days in a row and asked if everything was okay. I told her I was fine and kept working. The distraction of problem-solving felt better than thinking about family drama. Better than imagining Haley crying to our parents or the extended family taking sides. I stayed late most nights that week. Office quiet after everyone else left. Just me and spreadsheets and vendor proposals. The work was satisfying in a way family never could be. Clear problems with clear solutions. Effort that produced visible results. Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Deb. She said she needed to apologize for believing the rumors without talking to me first. Said she saw the HR report that Linda shared with everyone and felt terrible about jumping to conclusions. The message was long and detailed, explaining how she should have known better than to trust gossip, how she should have called me directly. I read it twice and felt some of the tension in my shoulders ease. I texted back that I appreciated the genuine apology and accepted it. She responded immediately, asking if we could get coffee sometime, and I said maybe in a few weeks. The apology felt real, not performative or obligatory, just honest acknowledgement that she messed up. More family members started reaching out over the next few days with awkward apologies. My cousin Maria sent flowers to my office with a card saying she was sorry for doubting me. Aunt Linda forwarded me screenshots of the HR report she'd sent to the family group chat with a message saying everyone needed to see the truth. Uncle Robert sent a text Saturday morning, just one line: "I was wrong to call you disgusting." I read it 3 times, trying to find any genuine remorse in those 8 words. The apology felt more obligatory than sincere, like someone told him he had to say sorry. I texted back a polite thanks and left it at that. Some bridges didn't need to be rebuilt right away. Maybe not ever. Sunday evening, I was scrolling through my email when Linda texted asking if I'd seen Haley's social media posts. I said I'd been staying off social media completely to avoid the drama. She sent me screenshots. Haley had posted a long, rambling message about betrayal and family loyalty, about how some people value money more than relationships, about learning who your real family is when times get hard. The post had dozens of comments. Most of them were from relatives I barely knew, asking why she was posting cryptic messages instead of taking responsibility. A few people called her out directly. Tony commented, asking why she was playing victim when she spread lies. Nancy wrote that maybe if she hadn't lied about her sister, she wouldn't be in this situation. I looked at the screenshots for maybe 30 seconds and then deleted the text thread. Let Haley paint herself as the victim online. Let her perform for an audience. I wasn't participating. Tuesday morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman identified herself as Mrs. Fleming from the financial aid office at Haley's college. She said she was calling about the canceled tuition payment since I was listed as a sponsor on Haley's account. I told her very clearly that I was no longer providing financial support for Haley and asked her to remove me from all records immediately. She asked if I wanted to reconsider given that the semester had already started. I said no. She made some notes and said she'd update the account. The call lasted maybe 3 minutes. Professional and straightforward. No drama or emotion, just administrative changes. Linda called that evening with news. Haley had missed the tuition deadline and got dropped from all her classes for non-payment. She was frantically trying to get emergency loans, but her credit wasn't good enough without a cosigner. Our parents couldn't qualify because of their own debt. Credit cards maxed out. Mortgage behind. Linda's voice was careful when she told me this, not asking me to help, just reporting what was happening. I thanked her for letting me know, and we talked about other things for a few minutes before hanging up. After the call, I sat on my couch staring at the wall. I felt a small pang of guilt, brief and sharp. Haley was 28 and losing her classes, 1 year away from graduating. But then I reminded myself how this started. She created this situation by lying about me sleeping with my boss, by telling our entire family I was a whore who slept my way to success. Natural consequences weren't cruel. They were necessary for growth and accountability. She needed to learn that destroying someone's reputation had real costs. That actions came with prices you actually had to pay. That night, my phone rang at almost midnight. My mother's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Her voice came through, broken and thick with tears, begging me to reconsider the tuition situation because Haley was devastated about losing her classes. She said Haley had been crying for hours and couldn't sleep. She was sitting in her room staring at the wall. I listened without interrupting while my mother went through her entire speech about second chances and family forgiveness. When she finally stopped talking, I told her very calmly that Haley needed to learn that actions have real consequences. That maybe this would teach her not to destroy people's reputations out of jealousy and spite. My mother started crying harder and said I was being cruel, that I didn't understand how much Haley was suffering. I said I understood perfectly, that suffering was the whole point of consequences. And then I ended the call. The next morning at work, I was reviewing spreadsheets when Ralph knocked on my office door. He came in and closed it behind him, which was unusual. He said he'd heard through mutual connections that my family situation had resolved in my favor. I felt my face get hot, wondering who he'd been talking to, but he quickly explained that Bonnie from HR had mentioned it in passing during a meeting. Ralph said he was impressed with how I'd handled the false accusations professionally while dealing with personal betrayal. Then he told me he was nominating me for the Leadership Excellence Award, that the company needed more people who maintained integrity under pressure. The validation from my boss felt better than any family apology could have because it was based on my actual work and character, not blood obligation or guilt. I thanked him genuinely and said I appreciated his support more than he knew. He nodded and left, and I got back to the vendor analysis, feeling more confident in my professional identity than I had in weeks. The work felt good, focusing on problems I could actually solve with logic and data instead of family drama that made no sense. 2 weeks passed with relative quiet. I threw myself into projects and avoided thinking about Haley or my parents. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, my desk phone rang. Security downstairs said my sister was in the lobby and wanted to come up. I told them to send her away, that I didn't want to see her. The guard said he'd tell her, but called back 5 minutes later sounding stressed. He said Haley was refusing to leave and making a scene, yelling and crying in the lobby. I told him to call the police if she wouldn't leave peacefully. The report said she'd been screaming that I ruined her life, and she was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really am. She tried to push past the security desk to get to the elevators. When the guard blocked her path, she'd started throwing things from the waiting area, magazines and brochures flying everywhere. The police had to physically guide her out while she was still yelling threats. I saved the report in my documentation file in case she escalated further, and I needed evidence of her behavior. My father left an angry voicemail that afternoon saying I'd had Haley arrested, which wasn't true at all. She got herself escorted out for trespassing and causing a disturbance after I told security not to let her up. I listened to his entire message without calling him back because there was no point arguing with someone who wouldn't listen to facts. He'd already decided I was the villain in this situation. That evening, Aunt Linda texted, saying the family was splitting into camps. Some people were supporting me for setting boundaries, while others thought I was being too harsh and should help Haley anyway. I texted back that I was okay with people picking sides because it showed me who actually cared about truth and accountability versus who just wanted peace at any cost. Linda sent back a thumbs up and said she respected my position. The monthly company meeting happened on Friday. Ralph stood at the front of the conference room and announced several nominations for the Leadership Excellence Award. When he said my name, my team started clapping enthusiastically. Several colleagues came up to me afterward and congratulated me. 3 different people mentioned they'd heard rumors weeks ago, but never believed them because they knew my character and work ethic. One guy from accounting said he'd actually laughed when someone tried to tell him I was sleeping with Ralph because anyone who'd worked with me for more than 5 minutes knew I earned everything through pure competence. Walking back to my office after the meeting, I realized something important. My professional reputation had survived because I'd built it on 12 years of consistent excellence and integrity. Haley's lies couldn't stick because everyone who actually worked with me knew the truth about who I was. The people who mattered, the people who saw me every day, they never doubted me for a second. That weekend, I got a long email from Haley. She wrote several paragraphs detailing how she'd been forced to take a semester off and was now working retail to save money for tuition. She described her disappointment and shame in detail, talking about how embarrassing it was to work a cash register when she was supposed to be graduating soon. The whole email was clearly designed to make me feel guilty enough to resume payments. I read it once and then deleted it without responding because engaging would only encourage more manipulation. She needed to sit with the consequences without me rescuing her from discomfort. A few weeks later, my mother called on Thanksgiving morning. Her voice was careful and measured when she asked if I'd come to dinner. She said we needed to move past this as a family and that everyone missed me. I told her I already had plans and kept my tone polite but firm. She asked what plans could be more important than family on Thanksgiving. I said I was volunteering at a community kitchen downtown and spending the holiday helping people who actually needed support. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds before she said she hoped I'd reconsider. I thanked her for the invitation and ended the call. Then I got dressed and drove to the community center where I'd signed up to serve meals. The parking lot was already full when I arrived. Inside the main hall, volunteers were setting up tables and heating trays of food. I checked in at the volunteer coordinator's desk and got assigned to the serving line. Someone touched my elbow, and I turned to find Aunt Linda standing there in jeans and a sweater. She smiled and said she figured I'd be here instead of at the family dinner. We worked side by side for the next 4 hours, serving turkey and mashed potatoes to families who lined up with paper plates. During a quiet moment, Linda mentioned she'd always noticed how my parents favored Haley. She said they expected me to compensate for their lack of savings, and that wasn't fair to anyone. I asked why she never said anything before. She admitted she didn't want to cause problems, but watching what happened with the tuition made her realize staying quiet was its own kind of problem. We talked honestly while refilling serving trays and wiping down tables. She said my parents put too much pressure on me to be the responsible one while letting Haley avoid consequences. I felt something shift inside me, hearing someone from the family actually acknowledge the pattern I'd lived with for years. The holiday apart from my immediate family felt different from what I expected. Not lonely or sad, but actually freeing in a way that surprised me. I realized I'd been carrying the weight of their expectations and dysfunction for so long that I forgot what it felt like to just exist without that pressure. Setting boundaries wasn't cruel, like my mother claimed. It was necessary for my own mental health and future. I couldn't keep funding Haley's life while she tried to destroy mine. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when my family chose drama over truth. The turkey and stuffing I ate with the other volunteers tasted better than any family dinner I could remember. In early December, Aunt Linda called with news about Haley. She said Haley got approved for student loans after finding a cosigner through her college's financial aid program. The loans would cover spring semester and her final year. Linda mentioned Haley would be able to return to school in January, but she'd graduate with significant debt now. I felt my shoulders relax, hearing that Haley found a solution without my help. It proved she was capable of handling her own responsibilities when she had no other choice. The debt would be a lasting reminder that actions have financial consequences, just like in the real world. Maybe having to pay back those loans herself would teach her something about the value of money and relationships. Maybe she'd think twice before lying about someone who'd been supporting her. My father sent a brief text a few days later. It said Haley was going back to school and they hoped I was happy with the outcome. I read it twice and then put my phone down without responding. There was nothing to say because I wasn't happy or unhappy about Haley's situation. I was just no longer responsible for it. She made her choices, and now she'd live with them. I made my choices, and I'd live with mine. The difference was I could sleep at night knowing I'd done nothing wrong. Work ended the year strong with my team hitting every target we'd set back in January. Ralph called a meeting in mid-December to review our numbers and congratulate everyone on the results. After the meeting, he asked me to stay behind. He closed his office door and told me the leadership award would be presented at the January company meeting. He said the executive team was impressed with how I handled both the professional challenges and the personal attacks on my character. I thanked him and mentioned I was just doing my job. He smiled and said that's exactly why I deserved the recognition. Walking back to my office, I felt proud of what I'd built over 12 years. My professional success belonged to me, and nobody could take it away with lies or gossip. I'd earned every promotion through actual work and results. Cousin Deb texted me right before Christmas, asking if I wanted to come to a New Year's party at her place. She said it would be the extended family members who supported me through the drama. Smaller than the usual family gathering, but more genuine. I texted back that I'd be there and asked what I could bring. She sent back a smiley face and said, "Just myself." The party was exactly what Deb promised. About 15 people in her living room, eating appetizers and drinking champagne. Aunt Linda was there with her husband. Cousin Tony's sister came without Tony. A few other relatives I hadn't seen since the whole mess started. Everyone was relaxed and friendly. Nobody brought up Haley or the tuition or any of the drama. We just talked and laughed like normal people at a normal party. Around 11, someone mentioned they'd run into Haley at the grocery store. They said she seemed more serious and focused now, less of the bratty attitude she used to have. Another cousin agreed and said facing real consequences seemed to be changing her. Aunt Nancy walked up to me near midnight, looking uncomfortable. She cleared her throat and said she wanted to apologize for what she said at my parents' house. She admitted she was wrong to judge me so harshly without knowing the facts. She said watching how everything played out made her realize I did the right thing by not enabling Haley's behavior. I accepted the apology and told her I appreciated her saying so. She squeezed my hand and walked away, looking relieved. When the countdown started at midnight, I stood with these relatives who chose to believe in me and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite happiness, but something close to peace. The rest of the party felt different after that midnight moment. More relatives came up to me with awkward apologies over the next hour. My cousin on Dad's side admitted she judged too fast without knowing the facts. Another uncle said he should have asked for my side before believing gossip. I thanked each person and told them I appreciated them saying so, but I didn't pretend everything was fine now. Trust doesn't come back just because someone says sorry. I kept conversations short and polite, accepting the words without promising instant forgiveness. Some people looked relieved when I accepted their apologies. Others seemed uncomfortable when I didn't immediately hug them or act like we were close again. That was okay with me. I needed time to see if people actually changed or just felt guilty for a night. Aunt Linda stayed close during the party, introducing me to relatives who wanted to reconnect but felt nervous. She understood I was being careful about letting people back in. Around 2 in the morning, I headed home feeling tired but satisfied. The family dynamics were shifting, and I was okay with that. January came fast with the Leadership Awards ceremony scheduled for the third Friday. The company rented a conference room at a nice hotel downtown and invited all the regional directors plus the executive team. My whole team showed up dressed in business formal, looking proud and excited. Ralph stood at the podium after dinner and started talking about what makes a good leader. He mentioned integrity first, saying real leaders stay true to their values even when it's hard. He talked about perseverance through challenges, both professional and personal. He described someone who keeps working toward goals despite obstacles and criticism. I realized halfway through his speech that he was talking about exactly what I'd done over the past few months, staying professional when Haley spread lies, maintaining my work standards while dealing with family drama, setting boundaries even when people called me cruel. The award itself was a glass plaque with my name and the company logo. But Ralph's words meant more than the physical trophy. When he called my name, my team stood up, clapping loudly. I walked to the front feeling genuinely proud of what I'd built through 12 years of actual work. After the ceremony, 6 colleagues from my team took me to a bar 3 blocks from the hotel. We got a corner table and ordered appetizers and drinks. Everyone was laughing and telling stories about projects we'd worked on together. My team lead mentioned the time I stayed until midnight helping him fix a contract error before a deadline. Another colleague brought up how I trained her when she was new and scared of making mistakes. These people chose to work with me and respect me based on what they saw every day, not because we shared blood or grew up in the same house. The chosen family I'd built through work felt more real than my biological family ever had. They knew my actual character because they witnessed it through actions over years. Nobody at this table believed I slept my way to success because they'd seen me earn every promotion through results and dedication. Around 11, we finally left the bar, and I hugged each team member goodbye, feeling grateful for people who actually knew me. The support from colleagues who had no obligation to care meant everything. 3 days later, Aunt Linda texted asking if I had a minute to talk. I called her back during my lunch break. She said Haley had reached out, asking if I'd be willing to meet for coffee to talk about everything. Aunt Linda forwarded me the actual message after we hung up. Haley's text was short and direct. She said she understood if I wasn't ready, but she wanted a chance to apologize in person and show me she was changing. I stared at my phone for a long time, thinking about whether I wanted to see her. Part of me was still angry about the lies and the damage she tried to cause. Another part wondered if she really was growing up and taking responsibility. I didn't respond to Aunt Linda for 4 days while I thought it through. Finally, I texted back saying I wasn't ready to meet yet, but might be open to it later if Haley finished this semester successfully. I needed to see actual follow-through before sitting down face to face. Aunt Linda said she understood and would let Haley know. My mother called the following Sunday afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but decided to pick up on the 4th ring. She started by saying she understood why I needed space from the family. Then she apologized for not believing me when the rumors first started. Her voice sounded different from usual, less defensive, more genuine. She admitted she should have asked for my side of the story before taking Haley's word as fact. She said watching everything unfold over the past months made her realize she'd always expected me to be the responsible one while making excuses for Haley. The apology didn't include any buts or excuses about why she acted that way. She didn't pressure me to forgive her immediately or come to family dinners. She just said she was sorry and wanted me to know she recognized her mistakes. I sat on my couch listening and feeling something shift inside. This felt real in a way her previous attempts hadn't. I told my mother I appreciated the apology and needed more time before things could go back to normal. She said she understood completely. Then she suggested maybe we could try occasional phone calls to start rebuilding our relationship slowly. Nothing forced or scheduled, just checking in when it felt right. That sounded manageable to me. I agreed we could try phone calls and see how it went. She thanked me for being willing to give her another chance. We talked for another 10 minutes about neutral topics like her garden and my recent work projects. The conversation felt easier than any we'd had in months. When we hung up, I felt cautiously hopeful that maybe we could build something healthier than what existed before. It wouldn't be the same relationship we had, but it might be better. Work kept me busy through January and into February. Ralph assigned me to lead a task force restructuring our vendor relationships across all regions. The project was huge and complex, exactly the kind of challenge I loved. My team worked long hours analyzing contracts and negotiating better terms. We saved the company almost $2 million in the first month alone. Ralph pulled me aside one afternoon in late February, saying the executive team was impressed with my leadership. He mentioned the current VP was planning to retire at the end of next year. He said my name was already being discussed as a potential replacement. I thanked him and tried to stay professional, but inside I felt amazing. The career I'd built through dedication and actual results was finally paying off in ways that mattered. 12 years from the mailroom to potentially VP. Nobody could say I didn't earn every step of that climb. In early March, Haley sent me an email. The subject line just said Spring Semester Update. I opened it, expecting more drama or manipulation, but the message was short and factual. She said she'd completed all her classes successfully and was on track to graduate in May. She mentioned working part-time at a coffee shop to help cover expenses and taking responsibility for her student loans. The email didn't ask for anything or try to make me feel guilty. It was just information about her progress. I read it twice, looking for hidden manipulation, but didn't find any. Maybe she really was growing up and learning what accountability looked like. The change felt significant, even if I wasn't ready to trust it completely yet. I waited 2 days before responding to keep the tone measured. My reply was brief. I said, "Congratulations on finishing the semester," and encouraged her to keep working hard. I didn't add anything personal or emotional, just simple acknowledgement of her accomplishment. The neutral tone felt right for where we were. Not cold enough to slam the door shut. Not warm enough to pretend everything was fine. Small steps toward maybe rebuilding something in the future felt appropriate after months of distance and consequences. She didn't respond to my email, which was good. No drama or attempts to push for more, just accepting the small gesture I offered. By April, I'd settled into a comfortable routine that felt healthier than anything before. I called my mother every other week for 30-minute conversations about safe topics. We were rebuilding slowly, without forcing closeness that wasn't ready yet. I went to Aunt Linda's house for Easter dinner with the relatives who'd actually apologized and meant it. About 12 people total. Smaller gatherings with people who earned my trust back through actions over months. I kept complete boundaries with family members who never apologized or still believed Haley's lies. Uncle Robert never reached out, so I never contacted him. Cousin Tony's wife apologized, but Tony himself stayed silent, so I stayed distant from both of them. The family structure looked totally different now. Not the big chaotic gatherings where everyone pretended to be close. Instead, I had smaller connections with people who actually respected me. It felt more honest this way, more real. I wasn't pretending to have relationships that didn't exist anymore. The boundaries I set protected my peace and showed me who really cared about truth versus drama. A week after Easter, my father texted asking if we could meet for lunch. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding that I'd meet him at a diner downtown on Saturday at noon. Public place, neutral territory. He showed up early, already seated in a booth by the window when I walked in. He looked older than I remembered, more gray hair, deeper lines around his eyes. We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence until the server left. Then he started talking. He said he and my mother failed both me and Haley in different ways. They taught Haley she could get away with anything because she was the baby. They taught me I had to be perfect and self-sufficient because I was the responsible one. He admitted they took my support for granted. Expected me to keep achieving without recognition while praising Haley for basic accomplishments. He said watching me cut Haley off forced him to see the pattern they'd created. One daughter who felt entitled to everything. Another daughter who gave everything and got nothing back. The apology felt real this time. No excuses, no asking me to forgive Haley or resume payments. Just owning his mistakes as a parent. I told him I appreciated the honesty, but rebuilding trust would take time. He nodded and suggested we start with monthly lunches where we could talk honestly without the rest of the family involved. I agreed to that. Small steps felt manageable. Before we left, he said something that stuck with me. He said he was proud of my success and wished he'd said that more often instead of just expecting me to keep climbing without acknowledgement. The conversation was difficult but productive. We both knew the relationship would never be what it was before, but maybe it could become something more honest. By mid-May, Aunt Linda called with news about Haley. She'd graduated with her degree and already landed a job in her field. Not a great job, entry-level with okay pay, but she was supporting herself financially for the first time in her adult life. Linda said Haley seemed different, more serious, more focused. She'd learned what it meant to work for something instead of expecting handouts. The experience of facing real consequences appeared to have changed her in ways that years of enabling never could. Linda mentioned Haley was paying her student loans on time and living in a small apartment with 2 roommates, building an actual adult life. I felt something shift hearing that news. Not forgiveness exactly, not trust, but maybe the beginning of respect for the person she was becoming. Linda invited me to Haley's graduation ceremony. I almost said no, but something made me agree to go. I drove to the college on graduation day and sat in the back row of the auditorium. Hundreds of students in caps and gowns, proud families taking photos. I watched my parents in the 3rd row, my mother dabbing her eyes with a tissue. When they called Haley's name, she walked across the stage with her head high. She'd earned this through her own effort and her own debt. Not my money, not my support. Her accomplishment. As she walked back to her seat, she scanned the crowd, and our eyes met for just a second. She gave me a small nod. Not dramatic, not apologetic, just acknowledgement. I nodded back. In that moment, I realized we might eventually build something healthier than what we had before, an adult relationship based on mutual respect and accountability instead of her entitlement and my enabling. The family dynamics would never be what they were. Too much damage, too many lies. But they were more honest now. I'd built a life where my worth wasn't dependent on their approval or their drama. I had my career, my boundaries, my peace. And maybe someday, I'd have a real relationship with my sister, but only if she kept earning it. This whole journey taught me so much about standing up for myself and the true meaning of family. It was hard, and honestly, sometimes it felt like I was losing everything. But in the end, I gained a respect for myself and clear boundaries that I never had before. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it felt like the hardest thing in the world? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.